It's a Friday, and we've already gone off the rails or on the rails. Sometimes I don't know, Mace.
Okay, well, on the rails means you're going back in the correct direction as the countdown comes on. Off the rails means you're not going anywhere because you're off the rails. The train is just sitting there.
Right.
So I think it's sort of like there was a Seinfeld episode where they debated on the wagon versus off the wagon, and Jerry kind of had it wrong. Because he claimed that when you were an alcoholic, you were on the wagon.
Right.
Whereas you're off the wagon. His logic was, well, how did they get the liquor from town to town on a wagon?
That is correct.
Anyhow.
How do the Broncos get from town to your town? How about our town? The Mile High City, Orange and Blue Today, presented by Sean Ponda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. And Mace, it's an interesting week, and we are here to preview the Jets-Broncos, and this is the type of contest where it's going to be tougher than you think. Some Jets injuries we'll get to that help the Denver Broncos. That's coming up in just a little bit. But overall, before we jump into the specifics, Mace, this is a Jets team that could do what Chicago did on Thursday night. You just saw them against the Commanders. They played for their coach. They played for their quarterback, and the Bears went off. Well, you don't want the Jets doing that to you on Sunday.
Well, they're going to get there in a different way, right? I mean, is Zach Wilson as capable of incorporating Garrett Wilson into the game as Justin Fields was getting a big game out of DJ Moore on Thursday night in Washington? I'd argue, based on what I've seen of Zach Wilson so far, the answer is a negative there.
Yes, the answer is no.
So it's going to happen differently. The threat from the Jets is going to come on the ground. It's going to be Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook. It's making plays there. That controlling the pace, trying to do to the Broncos front seven what the Bears did for long stretches last week, what Miami did the entire game 12 days ago, and even what Washington was doing and the Raiders were doing early.
Right. It's been an interesting locker room this week, and I'll say something and you can back me up or have your own opinion, because we have our own opinions on this show. Nobody really spends much time thinking or talking about Nathaniel Hackett in the Broncos locker room. Okay? You know what most guys are thinking about and talking about off the record? Randy Gregory getting traded now to the 49ers. But that's the concentration. So for I think the Hackett thing's a big deal for us, for the media types, the muggles. But to the players, I didn't really catch guys, unless they were asked, coming out and saying like, wow, we're going up against Hackett this week.
It's not so much going up against Hackett. I mean, really the thing that you got was you're going up against something that's very familiar. And we have some beautiful bean footage, I believe.
Yes, we do.
Of Josie Jewell, inside linebacker, who is back this week. He had a full practice Thursday. He's good to go on the injury report. He is not listed as questionable or out, which means he is set
good
to play.
Go.
Yeah, no problems there. And I asked Josie Jewell yesterday about Hackett and the Jets offense and, what you could get by practicing against it last year, but also, were there any differences really with what the Jets are doing now compared to what the Broncos defense saw in practice on a day-to-day basis? And let's roll that beautiful bean footage.
There's a lot of similarities, I think, between that one and this one. I honestly couldn't tell you a lot of the difference. I think it's a lot of duo, a lot of stretch, a little bit of gap scheme stuff. And then the passing stuff's pretty similar to me. So I haven't seen anything crazy different.
Is that to your advantage that you saw it in practice?
Right, yeah. I mean, we saw it through that whole year. So, yeah, I think it's definitely to our advantage. Hopefully we can be out there and we can just react quick to it.
So, to the Broncos' advantage defensively that they've seen this, and not a whole lot that's different.
Right. And notice what he brings up first.
That was, by the way, that was kind of a subtle dig.
A little bit. Yeah. But notice how he brings up their ground game. You know what Josie's thinking about. It's stuff in that run, and that's the key. Honestly, Mace, I think it's the key for both teams. Run the ball. Can you stop Breece Hall? And Dalvin Cook's kind of stopping himself, but you have a back with 32 carries on the year, a back with 30 carries on the year. It's full-blown RBBC, although Robert Saleh is saying that Breece Hall's no longer got the snap restrictions as he's had over the last couple of weeks. He comes back from a Week 7 injury against the Broncos, where he tore his knee.
Yeah, he had that big explosive run there in the first quarter last year. And if he doesn't get hurt in that game, the Jets run away with it.
Yes.
Instead, he's out for the season after tearing his ACL. Zach Wilson was not very good in that game, but the Broncos had Brett Rippon starting. That was just an ugly game. That was a terrible game to watch.
Are we in for a less ugly game this week?
I think so. I mean, look, you look at the records 1-3, and neither of these teams are tearing up the pea patch, as the late Red Barber used to say, the longtime radio broadcaster of baseball renown. But the Jets are playing at a high level, especially on the defensive side. They can run the football. They are coming off their best game. Actually, you could say both teams are coming off their best moments. The Jets coming off their best game overall, even though it was a loss to Kansas City. That, I think, allowed them to maybe stumble upon a success equation that could have benefits going forward, a way to be competitive with Zach Wilson at quarterback, because they're basically trying to figure that out. Even though the wildest storyline would have been if Trevor Siemian, who they signed to the practice squad,
Right,
former Broncos starter, if he had been playing in this game, but that's not going to happen. It's going to be Zach Wilson again. But I think they may have stumbled into a game plan that can work going forward to keep them competitive. And I don't think they're a playoff team. They look kind of like the team that they had last year that was 7-10, but they can stay on the fringes of the race and be competitive. That's really probably the best you can ask with Zach Wilson. Broncos, note I said not the best game, but the best juncture. The final 20 minutes of the game against Chicago.
right.
Yeah. The game in totality,
No.
I mean, I guess you could maybe say that, but they were so bad for the first 40 minutes of the game, especially on defensively. I just can't bring myself to say it was anything positive until that point.
Well,
So-
I will quote Sweet Home Alabama and say, do we know, Mo? Can you build momentum from that? Can you take what you did good against Chicago? It wasn't all good, but can you take that into the game performance and then carry it over to this week, and a week that it seems pretty sharp out there? Again, it's just practice. They have to take it to the field, Mace, but you saw a little extra oomph in practice this week.
I'm skeptical on momentum. I follow the baseball maximum that momentum is the next day's starting picture. So I'm a little cool on that. Look, if we're talking about momentum, the Bears wouldn't have gone to Washington and won by 20 points last night.
Right.
Because, I mean, they down the stretch, they were awful against the Broncos. But, they came out firing, took a lead, and didn't let it slip away. They threatened to let it slip away, but they didn't. Nice play by Fields to DJ Moore for the touchdown in the second half, and that was enough to ease him past the Broncos, or the Commanders, sorry. So that's why I'm a little skeptical on that. I got to see it. And the weeks of practice, look, you got a defensive coordinator out there in Vance Joseph who made a habit of saying that they had a good week of practice and it meant bupkis when you got to the game.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm cool on that. That doesn't resonate with me. I'm sorry.
What I want to see is how the Jets respond to barely beating Kansas City. Is that something where they feel confident, like Kansas City? I mean, that's Kansas City, right? The champs. And they went toe-to-toe, almost beat them. And then does that make them think, oh, it's Denver, we'll be able to handle this? Or is it deflating? Like, you give your best possible effort. Zach Wilson plays a hell of a game until the fumble, and you lose. So how do the Jets respond this week? That's what I'm curious about.
Are they going to be as jacked with Taylor Swift not in the stands? Or in a luxury suite, I should say.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. The NFL, it's such a week to week league. Everything changes. I mean, people are sitting there wondering, oh, how did the Broncos lose to the Commanders? And okay, well, Commanders just came out flat last night. They put it together in Denver. They didn't put it together against the Bears on Thursday night. That's the nature of it. You get results that are all over the place. That is why you've got a lot of gleaming casinos in Las Vegas, right?
Right.
Winners didn't build those. Losers did. And people have lost a lot of money betting on football because this game is so unpredictable.
Yeah. It's a funny shaped ball and it bounces funny for a reason. Well, if we look at another guy that could use some work, as we say, run the ball, set things up, set up some deep shots. If you have time for Russell Wilson, I think protecting Russell Wilson from all the Quincy's and the Quinnans and the Williams and the Wilsons, there's a lot of names to trip over this week with these teams, but we know
where
that
there's a
front
will,
seven,
there's a way.
Where there's a Williams, there's a way.
Williams and Wilson.
And Wilson, there's a way. And for this Jets team, that defense can lead the way. I honestly think in a couple of injuries, DJ Reed specifically in the Jets secondary that'll hurt New York, this might be the toughest defense you face all season long.
Yeah, you're looking right now at the Jets, DJ Reed out, Brandon Eccles out. Those are the two guys who are already listed as out for the Jets, both cornerbacks. Their depth is compromised there.
Yes.
So that's going to lead, I think, to some opportunities. This is where, if you're the Jets, you wonder, is Sauce Gardner going to travel, go from side to side, or are you going to put him on one side? If you're keeping him on one side, if Robert Saleh elects to do that, then I think you're trying to set up mismatches for Marvin Mims Jr. on the opposite flank. Because you get down depth-wise into the Jets' corners, that's where you don't have the speed and quickness to keep up with a guy like Marvin Mims.
Right. And speed kills. We know that. But Marvin Mims in the locker room, you got to talk to him yesterday.
Yes. And I talked with him about Sauce Gardner in particular, the all-pro cornerback for the Jets. Because, look, if you're game planning, if I'm Robert Saleh and I'm looking at the Broncos, I'm thinking, okay, who scares me? Who can beat my team? Who can beat us over the top? It's Marvin Mims Jr. Even though he hasn't played more than 17 snaps in a game, he is the threat to take the top off of you. So that's why I asked Marvin Mims Jr. specifically about going against Sauce Gardner. Let's roll that footage.
Very long, tall cornerback, moves well. I mean, he has long arms, so, his reach is critical. You let him get his hands on you, it's over. But at the end of the day, just try to keep his hands off you and just run with speed.
How do you avoid that with somebody who's
Yeah, it's really just technique, avoid as his hands come, kind of look at his release, look at his press patterns, kind of know when he's going to shoot, when he's not going to, and just look at it and meditate off of that.
Now, I thought we don't have the clip in right there, but I thought Sean Payton said something interesting today about Sauce Gardner, noting that what Gardner and Pat Surtain have in common is their length. Look, they're not the same type of corner.
No.
Surtain does not grab nearly as frequently as Sauce Gardner does.
Right.
But Payton felt that for the Broncos receivers, facing the length of Pat Surtain in practice was going to help prepare them to deal with somebody as long and as quick as Sauce Gardner is.
Right. I just love what Marvin Mims said there because he talked about press patterns. That's next level stuff. That young man studying, he's going to understand what his opponent likes to do in certain situations. He's going to watch his body. And if he misses on one of those punches, Mims is going to make him pay.
Yeah.
And fly right by him.
And you know what? If you've got a play that happens where Marvin Mims Jr. gets past Sauce Gardner, makes an explosive catch at Gardner's expense, that I think is going to be transformative for the offense on Sunday.
Yes.
That's the kind of play that will win you the game if you can pull it off.
Right. And you may only get one or two shots at it. You and I talked, I believe it was before practice today, and we were saying, like, if you can set up one of those deep shots, it might be once, it might be twice, but that's it. And that could be the game in what could be a close contest.
You get one shot, right? One chance, one shot. Mom's spaghetti.
Mom's spaghetti. Where's John Davis at? He's around
gosh.
here somewhere. He's back. Hi, John. Hi, everybody. Orange Blue Today, presented by Sean Ponda.
Oh, yeah.
Will Wilson have the time?
Yeah, hope so.
This offensive line's in for a huge test.
Biggest test of the season.
Yes.
Best defensive line that you faced, better than the one in Washington that you saw back in week 2. They're going to have their hands full. It'll help being at home. Maybe you can at least cut the false starts. Although the thing with the false starts that is interesting is how both Sean Payton and Mike McGlinchey have pointed to the cadence. McGlinchey mentioned that on Wednesday. Sean Payton has talked about it multiple times, and that's not on the O-lineman. That's on Russell Wilson.
Right.
And there were false start issues last year. Russell Wilson is a quarterback. Maybe he's just got a funky cadence that guys are having trouble getting used to.
He's got a commanding bark. I mean, he did back in college. So, yeah, Sean Payton even talked about it today. And he kind of put a little bit of the blame on himself in terms of maybe the length of the cadence.
Length of the play call, too.
Yes. Yeah. So we've talked about the length of play calls and cadence. And they're at home. So, don't have the away crowd against you. So
operating
maybe that helps.
Relative quiet. As it were.
Right.
Last week, by the way, in Chicago, they were putting up the number of false starts on the scoreboard. So when you got to false start number 5, right, was right up there,
Right.
for everybody to see. Yeah, this is going to be a really tough challenge.
Yes.
And tough in particular for the 3 interior guys, Ben Powers, Quinn Miners, and then Lloyd Cushenberry. Now, Lloyd Cushenberry as well, he is questionable for this game, by the way, with a quad injury. Limited today, limited yesterday and Wednesday as well, questionable for the game. And so I think he's going to play, but, you do wonder about Kush size-wise matching up with the Goliaths that the Jets have on the interior.
Right.
And now you have Kush at potentially less than 100% physically.
And he's already struggling this year.
Yes.
Which leads us to say, if maybe a week or two ago, you and I were talking about what could possibly happen. Like, and that's why in a game like against Miami, when you're down by 50, you can't play. And some of the younger guys, get them some experience. Like, will they be going to Forsyth? By necessity.
Well, Forsyth hasn't been active, right?
Right. He's got to be called up. He's got to get a jersey.
They're probably Luke Wattenberg first.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Use the force, Luke.
Do something.
You're gonna need it.
You're definitely gonna need it against those absolute giants.
Let's go, Luke. Luke, trust me. Yeah. If Luke Wattenberg gets in there, turn the targeting computer off. If you're him, trust the force. You're gonna need it because you're gonna need it against those guys up front.
I always like with Luke's when they say, "Luke, you shut your computer off." He's like, "I know."
What's wrong?
Be.
Nothing's wrong. I'm all right. Yeah,
he's okay.
But they don't get it. Okay. I mean, look, even to people in the Rebel Alliance, the Force, it was basically, the Jedi and all that. It was just like an ancient religion, right?
Which is funny because it was only 30 years prior. Revenge of the Sith. 30 years, the culture doesn't change that much. Trust me, I'm old, Mace.
Well, it doesn't change that much, but okay, let's think of it this way. The Empire was not exactly a free society, right?
Right.
So it's very possible the Galactic Empire could do a Oceania 1984 style scrubbing of anything positive that was connected to the Jedi and the Force. Now, the interesting thing is it seems like they probably left the Sith out because maybe they didn't want the public to know that the Emperor is also a Sith Lord. Okay. Probably didn't want them aware of that. So enough time passes and it's like, oh, it's out of sight, out of mind, right?
Maybe.
You've scrubbed it. I mean, it's basically kind of rumors. I mean, Yoda's in exile, someone like Tarkin knows about it, but Tarkin was already a grown-ass man, in the prequels, right? We see him supervising the construction of the Death Star. Well, not really supervising. He's watching over the first parts of it.
Right.
And then we come back to it in Rogue One, and he takes over from Krennic anyway.
Well, to quote Grand Moff Tarkin, this had better work. This had better work.
Risk, Veda.
For the
better work.
Denver Broncos. This had better work. And which Wilson has a better day.
It didn't work for them. That was
I know. Thing. It didn't work.
Yes.
So are we looking at a Death Star explosion this week? I hope not. But in the next week.
We're basically making the Broncos into the Empire.
Well, I'll say this. Sometimes those who write history aren't the good guys.
That's true.
You could make that argument quite a bit. But either way, in 1 week from today, we're going to have 2 Broncos games. If they're 0-2, man, that is the Death Star.
Yeah. If they lose these 2, it's sell.
Yes. Judy to the Panthers. Whatever.
Now, Adam Schefter did say this morning that there haven't been any conversations with Carolina and the Broncos regarding any wide receivers yet.
Right.
Yeah. Doesn't mean they won't happen.
Yeah.
At some point. But if they lose these 2 and they're 1-5, I don't think they're waiting for the trade deadline. I think they're starting to make moves.
Yes. I don't think they should wait for the trade deadline because you know what happens? Other teams make moves and then all of a sudden your assets are worth less.
I mean, how many days was it like a week before the trade deadline last year that the Panthers dealt Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that happens is the sooner you make the trade, the sooner that player has a chance to integrate himself on the roster where he's going. So has more value, right? You're getting more use out of that player.
Right.
So, 1-5, you're selling. Now, I'll give you an interesting thought, though. What if you lose this game and then go to Kansas City and pull off an upset? And everyone's going to be watching this saying, yeah, right. Like they're going to snap the 15-game losing streak to the Chiefs. Thursday Night Football lends itself to some weird results sometimes.
Yes.
And sometimes stuff happens, right? So imagine a scenario where you're 1-4, but then you go to Kansas City and you snap the streak and give everybody hope. Rebellions are built on hope.
Well, I'll quote Hawkeye. Don't do that. Don't give me hope. And I'm not saying I want them to lose to Kansas City. Obviously, we do. But if you lose to the Jets and you're facing Kansas City, again, you'd have to keep everybody healthy. How do they lose to the Jets? Is it barely last-second field goal? Something like that. But it's like this season is so important. I feel there's a fulcrum to the Broncos timeline. If we're going to go Star Wars, like World Between Worlds, this season, 2023, you're either going this way or you're going this way. And what you do this year, even if that means tank for Caleb or whatever, but what you do this season will reverberate, maybe for a decade.
Well, it determines what your plan is, right? Because I think a scenario that maybe we have not properly explored yet is the scenario where you sell and you struggle, but Russell Wilson still looks good. Like he stays in the top 10 in most QB metrics. I went through them on Twitter/X this morning. He's in the top 6 in passer rating. He's number 3 in that, I believe. In Pro Football Focus pass grade, EPA, and CPOE. EPA, expected points added per play, CPOE, completion percentage over expected. The only one that he wasn't highly ranked in was the ESPN QBR, where he was 18th. But that's still, you've got a bunch of metrics, and there are some others where he is a legit top 10 quarterback. But they're 1-3. And they're 1-3 against a caliber of competition that, isn't the most rigorous, right? You have three
the
teams.
Teeth of their schedule is just starting.
You have faced, they're NFL teams, and they've got pro players, and
they get paid too.
As John Fox would say, or as was said in Major League, they've got uniforms and everything. It's really great. They're pros, right? But you're about to step up in class here after this game against the Jets, which is going to be your 4th losing team in 5 games, with Kansas City, then Green Bay, Kansas City, and then Buffalo on the other side of the bye. It gets bumpy from here.
Yes.
But yeah, that scenario where the team goes 5-12 or something like that, or 6-11, but Russell Wilson plays well, then what do you do?
I'm still drafting a quarterback, and I'm developing him behind Russ.
Okay.
And I'm drafting one with a premium pick.
You're going right there at the top of the draft. You're taking Shedeur Sanders or Drake May. Probably not Caleb Williams, because you're not going to be in position.
No.
But Shedeur Sanders or Drake May.
I'm even considering moving up for Drake May.
Okay.
He's that dude.
Yeah, he is.
He's that dude.
Drake May would go number 1 overall in a lot of years.
And we'd be super excited if there was no Caleb Williams. We'd be just as excited. Like you have 2, sure things at quarterback this year.
This is one of those years. This is just one of those years where if you're going to suck, it's a good year to suck.
But if you're sitting drafting at 10 and you take Shedeur and let him sit for 2 years,
that's fine.
I think that's a great plan too.
That's fine. That's fine.
That's something they've never done. They've never given the time to develop the guy.
Here's the problem. And look, I agree with that personally. I think that's a great strategy to let a young quarterback marinate and grow and develop. It's basically the Packer philosophy, because they brought in Brett Favre after he'd done 1 year in Atlanta. They let Aaron Rodgers sit for 3 years before putting him out there. They let Jordan Love sit for 3 years. The results are mixed, but I think Love looks a lot better than he would have if he
looked better than he did at the Senior Bowl when you and I were there, and Steven Montez looked better than him.
Yes.
That was Justin Herbert's year.
Jordan Love looks like a solid NFL quarterback.
Yes. And that's something they've never done. And by the way, do you know what else Green Bay did during that time? I know you do. But they drafted the likes of Brian Braum. They had your Mark Brunell. This was Favre's time. They had your Aaron Brooks, Matt Hasselbeck,
and even a guy named Kurt Warner.
Exactly. So if guys worked out and they just we're out of time with you, you just went on.
Always keep looking at quarterback, even if you
Yes.
think you're set.
And Russ isn't going to have a problem with it. People, so many misconceptions about Russell Wilson. He wouldn't have zero problem with you having a rookie first rounder behind him.
It's what bothers me to this day about them not taking Sam Howell once he dropped to the 4th round in 2022.
Yes.
You need a better backup quarterback anyway, but always be looking. Even if you think you've got the guy, you can, if that quarterback is still flourishing, but you've developed this other player, you have a nice return. You can turn a 4th round pick into a 2nd round pick, right? You can improve the value of the asset. So that's a really technical way of saying it, but yeah, that's always be doing that. And so, yeah, if next year's a great year for offensive tackle, great year for edge rusher, okay? If I'm picking in the top 5, I'm still finding a way to get a quarterback, even if I'm bringing back Russell Wilson, even if Russell Wilson plays well.
Right.
And yes, at that point, you're basically saying the clock is ticking. I get why teams don't want to do that because it's not the instant gratification, A, and B, it's like, oh, we don't want to create a controversy because all the fans be calling for the backup. You can't worry about that. You can't worry about what the public thinks, clamoring for a young quarterback. You have to understand the value of the position. You want to get it right short and long term. You don't want to be caught short. Look, I mean, it didn't work out, but picking Brock Osweiler in the year they signed Peyton Manning in Simpsons parlance was a perfectly cromulent plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Made a lot of sense. The problem was they just picked the wrong guy, and they should have picked
Russell Wilson.
Or Kirk Cousins.
Yep. Hell, you had Chad Kelly here. There were times.
Bring him back from the CFL. Toronto Argonauts.
No, he's balling out up there north of the border. Either way, to quote Lumberg for the 2nd time in 30 minutes, which is probably a bad thing. It says a lot about me. Is this good for the company?
Well,
is this good for the Broncos?
Yes.
Drafting and developing quarterback? Yes.
Well, it's good for them, but there are people in the building who would say, "Oh, well, we need another edge rusher, or we need this, that, and the other." Don't get too caught in the weeds here. Quarterback. That's what it's about. I think back to the 2000 election when Tim Russert got on NBC when they were talking about the count in Florida. He's like, Florida on his whiteboard. Quarterback. That's what it is. That's where it's all about. And if you're picking in the top 10 in this draft class, and especially if the draft order falls a certain way where whoever has the 2nd pick may be willing to deal. And
especially if Justin Fields keeps balling out, so Chicago isn't considering a quarterback.
Yes. You have to strike while the iron is hot. This is an unusual year.
The stars are aligning
at
for
the position.
You. Don't screw it up.
Yes. Yeah, but you know me, I don't have a lot of faith.
Oh.
Sorry. We were sitting there in 2018 in the Josh Allen Lamar Jackson draft.
Don't get us started. I think they did get us started, or we got ourselves started. I don't know. How did we get here?
Anyway. I ask myself that every day.
Yeah. There you go.
How did we get here? And actually, you know what? And this is going to be my last thought here. If you really kind of go through things, the randomness of life, like if you really think about it, it'll paralyze you, right? Like the things that have to come together for things to work out a certain way. Like we know our reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
But step back and think of all the things beyond our control that had to create that reality. Mm-hmm. The people in our midst, the people that we meet, the chances of all of us taking the path that we took and coming across each other. I mean, sometimes it's just staggering. Needle in a haystack doesn't begin to describe it, but then you find these minuscule needles. You meander down the path, and you end up having your life enriched. But yeah, you think about like the random chance in life. A lot of people can't get their arms around it.
Mm-hmm.
Life,
football,
baseball, football.
You go to baseball,
of course. Oh,
you're the baseball guy.
Of course, it's the division series starts tomorrow, right? Or National League division.
Why are you asking me?
Yeah, you got.
When's those baseball playoffs start? Cecil?
Yeah, division series starts tomorrow. In the National League, Braves, Phillies, and Diamondbacks and the Dodgers.
I'll watch none of it, but That's just me.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'll watch for you. When I've got the TV on sports on Saturday, I'm sorry, it's not gonna be on football.
Yeah.
Baseball.
Oh yeah. There we go.
And soccer in the morning if I'm watching. If I have it on in the morning. Yeah.
He's Andrew Mason at Mace Denver on Twitter. I'm at Cecil Lammey. Matthew's the man in the chair. We appreciate you all. Thank you for watching Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Ponda. As always, stay tuned and would you please stay frosty,